What makes our hearts soar? It's in knowing we have devoted ourselves to serving you with care. The kind of care that goes above and beyond, taking you through unforgettable journeys that last a lifetime. As Asia's first and longest-serving airline, we are made for the skies. Experience heartfelt service when you fly with Philippine Airlines.
If we could ask everyone to find their seats. Mangyari pong maupo na po tayo. We will start in a few moments. Maraming salamat po. If we could ask everybody to take their seats. Mag-uumpisa na po tayo. Good morning, magandang umaga po sa kanilang lahat. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Welcome to the Ramon Magsaysay Center here in Manila. Muli po, ako po si Robbie Alampay. I'm the founder and chairman of Puma Podcast. I will be your host for today's lecture, Radical Compassion, Restoring Dignity Through Second Chances, the public lecture of 2025 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee FLAVIANO Antonio, Father Flavi Villanueva. Before we proceed, we do want to acknowledge ngayong umaga po nagpatawag ang gobyerno. The government this morning just called for a nationwide drill, an earthquake drill. Given all the things that we are facing, not just the earthquakes, our compatriots, our countrymen in Cebu, in the south, of course, are also in all our hearts and all our minds. But given everything, the government has called for a nationwide earthquake drill at our discretion, at the discretion of all our organizations, all our families, all our communities. We do want to acknowledge this. But we just want to announce that for the Ramon Magsaysay Foundation, we will be scheduling the organization's own earthquake drills at a later time. For now, it is enough for us to be reminded of the things we already know. We take a moment to practice being calm. And also, please be aware of the fire exits here to your left, to the left of the audience, are the fire exits. And the most basic thing, be aware of the open areas outside, most especially the Rojas Boulevard outside, where during these drills and in actual practice, we should all gather. Now, beyond that, for the orderly conduct of this program, the audience is reminded of the following house rules. Please observe silence during the program. Let us all be respectful to the speakers and to all our fellow participants. And during the open forum, you may write your question on pieces of paper provided, and this will be handed out to you, and you may hand them back to our ushers. Please secure your food stub to be presented to lecture food tables at the end of the session to collect your packed meals. In case of a medical emergency or any emergency, please approach any of the ushers. If there is any need to evacuate the venue, please stay calm. All doors of the hall will be opened. The ushers will facilitate an orderly evacuation if needed. The exit doors, as we've already discussed, are on the left side of the hall, that is to your left. And those who are on stage and from the rows 1 to 10 will use the door near the stage, while those on row 11 onwards will use the door near the back of the hall. Photos, videos, and audio documentation of the event, especially those of speakers, may be posted in our social media platforms, website, and other promotional materials of the event and the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation, along with our event partners. If you wish to be excluded from photos, videos, and audio documentation, please occupy the seats at the back of the hall as well as in the RM Plaza. This event will feature open and honest discussions that may include sensitive topics such as violence, kidnapping, trauma, and emotional distress, substance abuse, and death. We encourage all participants to prioritize their well-being throughout the event. We ask everybody to approach all discussions with empathy and respect. And now, finally, to officially open this year's lecture series and today's event, may we call on 2016 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee and a trustee of the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation, Ombudsman Justice Conchita Carpio Morales.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. And to our international guests, good morning. Over the past days, we have been witnesses to how this year's Ramon Magsaysay Awardees turn ideals into lasting chains, proving that leadership is grounded on conscience and can still be thriving in our time. Before we formally open, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the following people. Brother Mike Magsaysay Valenzuela, Board of Trustee member Ms. Suzanne Cicel, Dr. Manny Racelis of the Ateneo de Manila, Lot Ortiz of Lingap, Dr. Doris Naval, Martial Law Survivors Hub, Professor Celia Jimenez of De La Salle University, Nico Dizon, Justice for All, Alice Henchola Murphy of UPA, Sarah Sullivan of Obi Montessori Center, Professor Xiao Chua, Philip Susara of Kasapi, Vivian Sarabia, Oak Iden Zenga, I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, and of course, BOT Ambassador Delia Albert. I'm supposed to also enumerate those who are joining us through Zoom, but I don't see any list at all events. Hope those who are joining us in Zoom are in good health. Today's lecture, Radical Compassion, Restoring Dignity through second chances speaks to truth often forgotten in public life, that compassion, when genuine, is not weakness. It is courage. It demands structure, persistence, and a deep respect for human dignity. As someone who has spent so many years in public service, I have seen that justice and compassion must go hand in hand. Justice gives order. Compassion gives it purpose. One without the other leads only to indifference or cruelty. Father Flaviano Villanueva's work through the Arnold Janssen Kalinga Foundation reminds us of this balance. He shows that compassion can be organized, that can move beyond sentiment and become a system that restores lives, one person at a time. This gathering challenges each of us in government, in faith, in education, in every sector, to do the same, to make compassion not an exception, but a practice, not a feeling, but a policy. May today's lecture remind us that second chances are not a gift, but a right, and that a just society must always make room for redemption. Thank you. Again, a pleasant morning to all.
In many communities across the Philippines, the most vulnerable live in shadows, overlooked and ultimate to society. Families face the harsh realities of poverty, the access to food, shelter, clean water, and basic economic decency. Children grow up in this violence environment. Their dreams out of the way of oppression. Generations have built those inflicted luxury and sustenance. But the system that too often failed to protect them. These are the silent crises that go unnoticed by many, yet they shape the lives of millions. It was in this environment that FLAVIANO grew up and understood the urgency of change. From an early age, he was moved by the suffering around him and driven by a deep sense of compassion. Determined to make a difference, he founded the Magsaysay an organization dedicated to providing care and good to those society has ever known. Through this age, the foundation reaches out to the homeless, the hungry, and the poor. We fed not only the bodies, but also their souls, providing food, shelter, clean water, and bathing facilities, offering largely dignity. FLAVIANO's work is not isolated to truth and justice. Rather, we believe that healing begins from acknowledgement and confront injustice directly. As a wounded hero, FLAVIANO does not shy away from the harsh realities faced by the powerful. Instead, he embraces it, guiding communities towards a culture of healing where compassion, justice, and dignity are the cornerstones.
Maraming salamat po ulit, Justice Conchita Carpio Morales. We would also like to acknowledge, of course, all the organizations and partners that made this day possible. This lecture series is made possible by Philippine Airlines, the official airline partner of the 2025 Ramon Magsaysay Lecture Series, and SGV, major sponsor of the 2025 Ramon Magsaysay Awards Lecture Series. Today's lecture is presented by the Peace and Equity Foundation. The 2025 RMTLI Lecture Series is also supported by Pioneer Insurance. And we would, of course, also like to acknowledge our co-conveners, the 2030 Youth Force, the ASEAN Youth Organization, GoodGov PH, Philippine Young Water Professionals, Better with Water Philippines, the Far Eastern University Nicanor Reyes Memorial Foundation. We would also like to thank the official media partners of the 67th Ramon Magsaysay Award Festival season, Associated Press, Puma Podcast, Tatler Philippines. We would love to see you share your time with us here during the lectures. Please tag us on social media, should you be posting, at Magsaysay Award with the hashtags hashtag Ramon Magsaysay Award and hashtag RMTLI Lecture Series. And we'd like to remind everybody that this afternoon from 1 to 2 p.m., the Teatro ng Kalinga at Paghilom will be presenting a special creative theatrical performance for free right here at the Ramon Magsaysay Hall. And now, as Justice Conchita Carpio Morales has already briefly introduced, we are now pleased and very much honored to finally bring the last part of this lecture series to our featured lecturer and speaker today, our 2025 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee from the Philippines, Flaviano Antonio Father Flavi Villanueva.
Thank you so much, Robbie. Can you smile a bit just as to break my nervousness? Yan. Say hello, hello. To those following us, hello and good morning. Magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat. There are several parts that I would like to highlight in my lecture, and allow me to begin by saying, the Word became flesh. Today I stand before you not as someone who has all the answers, but as one who has been lost, found, and forgiven. A man who has known both darkness and grace, and who has seen again and again how mercy insists to have the last word. There is a verse that has guided me through from my theological formation in Divine Word School of Theology until today, and that is found in the prologue of St. John, John 1:14. This is what we say in the Angelus, and I say, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. But it was not only when I stepped into the small, dim cave of the Annunciation in Nazareth that the verse became real. There, in that silent and simple place, I realized the Word did not become a marble or doctrine. He became flesh, fragile, hungry, and human. I left the cave asking myself, how can my life and my words, my priesthood and my daily living become flesh among those who suffer, those people who am I called to serve, the poor, the wounded, and even among my family and friends? Brokenness and calling. That image changed me. I did not come to the priesthood from a place of perfection. I came from my own brokenness. Priesthood was something that I never dreamt because I don't feel worthy about it. Actually, nangongopya pa nga ako during Latin class. Kinukumpisal ko naman kaagad. And my professor would say, I believe that you have a vocation, carry on, just do not get caught. I knew what it was to wake up lost, ashamed, and afraid to begin again. But mercy found me in that darkness. Through the words of St. John Paul II during the World Youth Day in 1995, he uttered a command, a very compelling invitation: be not afraid. I began again, not because I had conquered my past, but because grace had chosen to redeem it. People do not come to me because they see perfection. They come because they are hurting, and because I too have learned what it is to be healed. The priesthood for me is not a pedestal. More, it is a place of kneeling beside others in need and wounded. It is a place of proximity. Priesthood for me is presence. The birth of Kalinga. When I was assigned to lead the Justice, Peace, Integrity of Creation ministry, I began with a question: how do we mirror the word among those living in the streets? The answer was not rhetoric. It was dignity. How can we once again offer the dignity that the streets robbed them of when they were living and still live in the streets? And so began what would become Arnold Jansen Kalinga Center. First, as a once a week kain ligo, that means eat and bathe, where the homeless could eat, take a shower, and change into clean clothes. At the beginning, most of them refused to bathe. Actually, I had to bribe them. You have extra rice. You could get extra viand if you take a bath. They had lived for so long unseen that even the dignity of feeling clean felt strange. But after a few weeks, something changed. One man took a bath. He took my bribe. Then after another, then another. And when they saw their faces again in the mirror, they smiled. Not because they were clean. They smiled because they had been seen. Nakita sila. Nakita nila yung sarili nila na maari pala akong luminis. They have seen themselves that I can also again become clean. From 1 day a week, we grew to 4. Now more than 300 men and women come each day. Every touch point, food, a haircut, a name, restores the soul piece by piece. Kalinga stands for kain, aral, ligo ng ayos. That is, eat, learn, bathe, and be well. It was not a feeding line. We refuse to be called a feeding center. It is a journey through 7 small stations of hope, from welcoming to listening to renewal. At the end, each one recites a pledge, a promise, a mission sending off. Just like we in the SVDs are missionaries, I believe that they too could become missionaries in their own right. And the statement says, kinalinga. Can we recite it? Very good, my dear homeless. I was cared for at Kalinga, so I too will care for others with joy. This is how mercy multiplies. When compassion met injustice. Then came a dark season for our nation. 2016 to 2022 was a time when Rodrigo Duterte was the president. The years of the so-called war on drugs, the bloodiest years in our Philippine history. The streets we once walked to serve food and offer baths have been turned into streets of bloodbaths. This became so difficult that even the scent of fear and death was overflowing in the streets. The very people we had embraced began to disappear. Their bodies were found on the pavements, their names written on cardboards beside them, and the cruel shorthand for judgment without trial. That was the time of the extrajudicial killings perpetrated by Rodrigo Duterte and his cohorts. Two of them are at the Senate right now. And silence would have been complicity. I repeat, silence would have been complicity. And the Catholic Church was not exempted. So our common goal was to find compassion among these widows. Compassion had to grow teeth. It had to speak. It had to stand. It had to act. That is how Program Paghilom was born. A ministry for the widowed, the orphaned, and the traumatized. Those who lost loved ones in the violence of the war on drugs. Or I'd rather say, war against the poor. Paghilom means healing. And it focuses on it's a 7-phase journey of accompaniment, from listening, counseling, documentation, from livelihood to education and scholarship to leadership formation. A mother, a widow, once told me, "Father, they took my husband, but they cannot take away my hope." We even move and they even say, "I might have lost 1 or 2 loved ones, but eventually I found a friend. I found a new family." And with that, hope became a seed for the community. And some of them are here right now. We acknowledge them. I draw inspiration from each and every one of you. At La Loma Cemetery, the Catholic cemetery in the Diocese of Caloocan, now stands the Dambana ng Paghilom, a memorial columbarium which we erected so that the dead can be named, mourned, and remembered. Each urn tells a story that power and tyranny tried to erase. A story of a father, a story of a brother, a story of a breadwinner unable to become a source of love to his family because they have been silenced. We call these efforts in the Dambana ng Paghilom an act of offering some dignified sense some sense of dignity to the abandoned dead. After exhuming them, we bring them to our good friend, Dr. Raquel Fortun. Is she around? Doki? Wala po. We call the remains that we bring to them, we call them mga kalansay ng katotohanan. In English, skeletons of truth. Because even the bones speak the kind of manner how they were tortured and eventually killed. If there are 3 lessons that I have learned from all this, I skip one part. From healing to justice. Our journey with the families has taught us this. Healing without truth is incomplete. I repeat, healing without truth is incomplete. We began documenting their stories, working with lawyers, human rights advocates. A good number of them are here with us now. And all those who believe that the lies that were spread by that government back then were all fake and unreal. We continue to exhume bodies, identify their names, return the urns to their families, and allow them to celebrate and to mourn with their loved ones who were snatched from them on that fateful day, evening, or simply when they were eating as a family. Today, I am cooperating with some investigators before the International Criminal Court. The arrest of one principal figure may feel like vindication, but arrests alone do not restore a nation's soul. It is not enough that we arrest the architect, because the architect is just one of those who built the house. The architect had the help of the mason, the electrician, the painters. So there are still a lot of culprits to be arrested. Hopefully we will have a green Christmas when one senator will be arrested soon. And hopefully his fellow senator would follow. Networks of impunity remain, and so our work continues to speak, to accompany, to tell the truth until justice and mercy meet again. Lessons and hopes learned. If I were to name lessons, 3 would stand out the most. First, dignity precedes development. Before you teach or train, we tell this in Kalinga Center. Kindly ask the name, first and foremost, of the person in front of you. We've done so many projects and outreaches, but have we ever remembered the name of the person that we have helped? Ask the name and remember the face. The second would be, survivors are not victims forever. Given opportunities, they become companions and leaders in the journey. We call them wounded healers for a wounded nation. The third, certainly not the least, would be truth heals. For families to recover, the facts must surface. The facts are far different from what the Philippine National Police have shoved in their throats with fake news and fake identities. For society to heal, the lies must end. Sobra na. Tama na. Anong sunod? Sobra na. Tama na. Bahala kayo. Ikulong na. We now hope to deepen partnerships with local governments, train more peer companions, and build a mobile, compassionate clinic that would offer mercy and justice to communities. We hope and envision an EGK Truth Commission that would ask continuously the difficult questions. Sino ba ang mga pumatay? Who were the ones who killed? Who participated in the killing? Who are the people with blood in their hands? What happened on that fateful day and night? How many were killed? And from there, we hope slowly that renewal, repentance, through documentation and research, we can begin our national renewal. Finally, at the heart of all this, one simple theological truth lies. That is, God dwells among the wounded. The Word who became flesh did not come to the tidy and the safe. He came to the streets, to the broken bodies, to those the world calls unworthy. Each time we wash a homeless man, each time we bury an abandoned dead, each time we listen to a mother's grief, each time we stand for justice, for environmental cause and discrimination in education, the gospel takes flesh. Pope Francis calls this the revolution of tenderness. And it is a revolution that begins quietly. One towel, one basin, one chalk, one beautiful lady from the Maldives, one act of mercy at a time. In the end, the Word made flesh, because the Word is still becoming flesh today in every act of kindness, in every stand for truth, in every second chance offered to the lost. Radical compassion is not charity. It is courage. It is audacity to believe that love can still redeem what violence has broken. May we never tire of loving, never tire of serving, never tire of teaching, standing for the truth and injustice. Let us continue to do so, knowing that God will seek us. He is there. He is in the streets. He is in the wounded. And most especially, He is in one with us. Amen. Maraming salamat po.
Dito po kayo. Maraming salamat po. Thank you, Father Flavi, for never tiring. Maraming salamat, Father Flavi, na wala kayong kapagod-pagod. And thank you for reminding us of the importance of compassion, of radical compassion, of the importance of truth, empathy, dignity, and for continuing the stories, which reminds us that challenges to continue, our needs to continue. It is a challenge not just to deliver justice. It is a challenge not just to deliver a few to justice. I am reminded, Father, of a conversation we had with Ramon Magsaysay Awardee Sheila Coronel, who wrote and then keeps saying that the real challenge is not just to answer what it takes to deliver a few men and a few people to justice. The real question is, what does it take to redeem an entire society? It reminds us that this conversation should involve all of us. It continues to involve all sectors, all people, of all disciplines. To lead us into a glimpse, at least, of that conversation, we have set a discussion for this morning with Father Flavi, some Ramon Magsaysay awardees from around the region as well. And to lead us in that conversation, we will have Brother Edmundo Adolfo de Leon Fernandez, Brother Dodo, to those more popularly and more affectionately known to everyone as Brother Dodo. He is an educator and practicing artist, currently serving as the president of La Salle Green Hills De La Salle College of St. Benilde and De La Salle Lipa. He also holds the esteemed positions of treasurer and trustee at large of the Catholic Educational Association of the Philippines. He is the appointed chair of the Commission on Education of the De La Salle Brothers Worldwide and is a board member for several other academic institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, Brother Dodo.
Thank you, Robbie, and to our esteemed guests. It is my honor and my privilege to moderate today's lecture. Father Flavi, your talk was deeply, deeply moving for me, and I appreciate na hindi ka napapagod. You don't tire, and you continue to show courage despite a lot of challenges. Before calling our panelists, I'd like to ask a question, Father Flavi. In studying and in looking at your life, I was reading your life and work. What struck me is this: while your ministry is animated by the gospel and Catholic social teachings, your work with the poor and with the EJK victims' families finds its fire and its core in your life experience, particularly in your life before you were an SVD priest. In your own words, you led a life of self-indulgence and nights without purpose. You were lost, found, and forgiven. You mentioned that you do not come from a place of perfection. In your original paper, you also wrote, "I do not stand apart from those I serve." Can you elaborate on this radical compassion, on how your experience has shaped your life and your ministry and your work with the poor and with the victims of EJK?
Kaya ayoko si Brother Dodo para doctorate ko magtanong eh. A very dear friend, and one image that I strongly uphold in my daily prayer would be the image of the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd that never leaves the flock, but took a chance of leaving the 99 for the one. And that, I believe, is something that is sacred for me, that there should be no one living in the streets. We find at least 3 here who used to live in the streets. Mga naka-gel na ngayon, mga may relo na, naka-earbuds pa yung iba. And that is what the image of the Good Shepherd is about. Thus, the question how and why I don't get tired, the question where do we get strength, the question how the gospel becomes flesh, becomes real and becomes so significant only when I see them in the other person. Without seeing compassion in the other person, without engaging compassion with the other person, that it simply becomes a performance. it simply becomes a decoration. It simply becomes DPWH. Sorry for the word.
Thank you. Thank you, Father Flavi. You have been an inspiration to many people. You're an inspiration personally to me. But before we continue our conversation, maybe I'd like to bring in our esteemed panelists. I would like to begin with Professor Saira Rahman Khan, who is online. She is from Bangladesh. Professor Saira is a founding member and currently secretary of Odhikar, a prominent human rights organization in Dhaka, Bangladesh. The organization focuses on documenting, monitoring, and reporting on violations to civil and political rights and training human rights defenders. She is also the current chairperson of the Asian Federation Against Involuntary Disappearances and teaches at the School of Law at BRAC University at Dhaka. Once again, joining us, it's 2 hours behind Manila, so it's 8:30, 7:30. Joining us from Bangladesh via Zoom, please welcome Professor Saira Rahman Khan. Professor? Professor Saira?
Yes,
Your reaction to Father Flavi's presentation?
yes. Thank you very much. Slight technical issues. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you to the Ramon Magsaysay Foundation for inviting me to be a panelist at such an important event. And of course, my heartfelt congratulations to Father Flaviano. It is a great privilege to listen to Father Flaviano talk about his work, the challenges, and how they were overcome. The amount of work and the activities carried out by the Arnold Janssen Kalinga Foundation is mind-boggling. But it is something that can be replicated to help others anywhere in the world. Listening to Father Flaviano, 2 words stand out very strong to me: dignity and altruism. These are some of the building blocks of what makes a dedicated human rights defender. The recognition that everyone must be treated with dignity, without discrimination, and the continuing fight to ensure this, and to walk with survivors and family members and to empower them and to be their champion. In Bangladesh and across the region, there are human rights activists who work closely with family members of the disappeared and victims of torture, who report on extrajudicial killings and challenge governments and expose flaws that cause such violations to occur. It is beyond deplorable that these crimes against humanity and human dignity continue to occur with impunity, and that reaching out to survivors sometimes becomes an exercise in self-preservation. We can all learn from the work of Father Flaviano and the Arnold Janssen Kalinga Foundation on how to face these challenges and defeat them. The member organizations of the Asian Federation Against Enforced Disappearances, including my own, Odhikar, are all engaged in such activities. We also pay the price in the form of persecution, threats to existence, humiliation, etc., but continue regardless. The reason for this has been very clearly stated by Father Flaviano. Dignity precedes development. Everyone must be treated with dignity without discrimination. Survivors are not passive recipients. They must be empowered and supported. And the truth matters because we demand accountability. Thank you very much, Father Flaviano, for sharing your experiences, the work you and the Foundation do, and the principles you follow. It is indeed a great honor to meet you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Syra. Please stay on the Zoom as we have a conversation on radical compassion. Joining us next is Attorney Nicolene Arcaina. Can I ask her to come up to the stage? Attorney Arcaina is the Executive Director of the Ateneo Human Rights Center, and she has worked on programs and cases forwarding movement lawyering, access to justice, and accountability against gross human rights violations. Attorney Colleen has worked with communities of victims and survivors of the Philippine War on Drugs through paralegal education, evidence analysis, public advocacy, and strategic litigation and interventions before domestic and international fora like the Philippine Supreme Court and the International Criminal Court. She has been recently nominated as a finalist for the 3rd Kofi Annan Next Gen Democracy Prize. Please welcome again Attorney Nicolene Arcaina.
Good morning to everybody. Again, thank you so much to the Ramon Magsaysay Foundation for this invitation. And Father Flavi, congratulations. Father Flavi and I sort of go way back. When I was a younger lawyer, I think maybe batch 2 or 3 of Paghilom, I contributed to providing paralegal training to the widows. And I think in response to Father Flavi's lecture, I agree with Brother Dodo. It was very moving. I was crying in the corner because it reminded me so much of the work that everybody has done in the name of justice. For the past almost 10 years now. And from the lecture, I take away a few points. First, that the experiences of injustice are very much visceral. We feel them every day. We see them, we taste them, we smell them. One of the things I had to do as a lawyer, which a traditional lawyer probably would not do, is to go down the slopes of Payatas, Quezon City to visit a grieving mother after her husband has passed away. It was a rainy day, so if for those who know Payatas is a garbage landfill, so it gets very slippery going down the barangays. We visited the house where the wake was being held. And it's that same house. That same house was a crime scene for an illegal, a drug buy-bust operation. But the family still lives there, still eats there, still does their work in that house. And our experiences with communities show this, that injustice is felt, so much so that we are already accustomed to injustice. In the words of Father Flavi earlier, dignity somehow, and in some cases, justice, dignity feels strange. It sort of feels new. When earlier this year, that the former President Duterte was arrested, that felt strange. That felt new. And from this lecture, I take away this question. If injustice if experiences of indifference, of violence, of hunger, of poverty, of flooding, of corruption are so material and are so real, how can we imagine, or can we imagine and reimagine a future where justice feels as real, where justice feels as material? Darating kaya po yung panahon na ang hustisya ay mas ramdam natin at mas totoo kaysa doon sa mga karanasan natin ng kawalan ng hustisya. And this is our hope, I think. And this is the challenge to all of us. That hopefully in our revolution of tenderness, or taking part in that revolution of tenderness, we take steps every day to make justice and accountability and memory and truth real. And so this is my invitation to everybody, wherever you are and whatever you do. And again, Father, thank you so much. This reminds me of what else we can and what else we must do to achieve and to see that day to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney Colleen. Thank you. We will call our next panelist. Let us welcome on stage with us a 2008 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee for Emergent Leadership, Mr. Ananda Galapati. Sir? Ananda Galapati is a medical anthropologist and a practitioner in the field of mental health and psychosocial support across humanitarian crisis, development, and post-conflict settings. Ananda received the Ramon Magsaysay Award in 2008 for his work in Sri Lanka and was elected to the Ashoka Fellowship in 2011. Ananda is co-director of MHPSS.net, a global online platform hosted by the Institute for Health Policy, Sri Lanka. He is also director of strategy at the Good Practice Group, a social business working to strengthen communities and services in Sri Lanka and beyond. Since 1996, Ananda's work has been concerned with strengthening the support available to vulnerable groups and populations in low-resourced and adverse settings, both by direct intervention as well as through improving access to knowledge and skills, building collaborative networks, and enhancing coherence within the field. Ananda co-founded the Journal Intervention in 2003 and the global network MHPSS.net in 2008. His recent work focuses around how the field of MHPSS can respond to the decolonization and localization movements in humanitarian aid and global health. Once again, a warm round of applause for Mr. Ananda Galapati.
Good morning. Oops. Excuse me. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having me today. Father Flavi, I can't tell you how much your lecture moved and also, in many ways, sort of stirred things inside me. There's so much in what you said that resonates with my own experiences from a very different context of accompaniment of families of persons who were disappeared in the context of conflict in eastern Sri Lanka, and the work that has taken place within communities over the last decade or more in their search for justice. And there are many things in your lecture that one would like to respond to or react to, but I'd like to just maybe focus on 2 points to get us started in that conversation. And I think the first is that, perhaps looking a little bit beyond some of you describe a very systematic approach to the provision of support, of addressing multiple dimensions of challenge and also areas for the recovery of well-being of people. and ways in which you address different sources of difficulty and adversity that affect the lives of people. And there's a part of me that would say, well, we can sort of have a technical analysis of this and say, well, this is where you're addressing some of the stressors, the sources of threat, the issues of safety, or this is where you're building social capital, making social connections, or giving people the tools with which to think about their experiences, to process and manage memories and feelings, or even perhaps even develop systems of meaning that make sense of the suffering they've endured. And all that is true. But I do believe that in the story you tell and what I've been reading about your work and hearing you talk about it, there's something a bit more fundamental to all of that underpins all of that makes it really work, which is the relational. That fundamentally in the work that you're doing, there's something about the connection between human beings that transcends ideas of service provision, where it's not just an encounter between a helper and someone who is being helped, but really some kind of communion of a sort between human beings who are connecting at a level. You talked about naming people, by knowing them by their name and their face, and also you've spoken about the little things, the small steps, the celebration of birthdays together, the acknowledgement perhaps privately of shifts in people's perspectives from vengeance towards something more constructive. And I think that somewhere in there is, in some ways, a very ordinariness to a way of relating, to being together, that I think is fundamental to the transformative work of healing and of journeying towards justice and transcendence of past suffering. And so I think that's something that we could all learn from your work and your example and the kind of movement that you have been building, and recognizing that, in a sense, that connection between human beings is not magic in the sense that it erases suffering and it restores what has been lost, but it is a kind of magic in that it is the basis on which there can be some kind of transcendent or transformative process by which people can move forward in life and can build and sustain each other in a process of social change and personal change and growth as well. So I'm really grateful to you for embodying that and for reminding us of all of this. And I think that for all of us who try to help, we need to improve our skills in many areas, but I think there's a really important part of work that is about the inner, our relational capacity, our ability to be with others. And I just want to say one second point more briefly, Brother Dodo, sure. Which is around acknowledging some of the difficulty of working on contentious and dangerous issues. I mean, you are clearly navigating very difficult waters. A lot of the work that you do and that others who do similar work have to do is sometimes that has to be done in secret for safety or in the shadows or below the radar. And then at other times it actually has to be in full face of opposition or even threats. And there is an explicit cost to that, but I also believe that there's a more hidden, more cumulative cost of the challenge of working on things that involve fear and uncertainty and risk. And I think that for those of us who engage in that work, there is a real need to think about, and you have spoken about this, the need for self-care, the need for perhaps self-compassion, and ways of working together to sustain ourselves and to endure the long journey towards justice. So I hope that we will be able to speak a little bit about that and perhaps learn from you some of the resources, both inner, social, and perhaps spiritual, that you draw from in order to sustain your work. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Ananda. Thank you. Our fourth panelist, I'd like to call on stage Dr. Shu Meng Ing. A warm round of applause. Shu Meng is a Singaporean sociologist who earned her PhD from the University of Hawaii in 1979. Over more than 30 years, she has worked across countries and sectors in international development. In 1986, she moved to Laos to join her husband, Sombath Somphon, a renowned development leader and 2005 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee. In Laos, Shu Meng worked with organizations including UNICEF, focusing on education and women's empowerment. After retiring in UNICEF in 2008, she founded Thai Ban Crafts, a fair trade social enterprise supporting rural women artisans. Since Sombath enforced disappearance in 2012, captured on Lao police CCTV, Shu Meng has campaigned tirelessly for truth and justice. She has appealed to Lao authorities, engaged the international community, and spoken widely to keep his case in the public eye. To honor her husband's legacy, she published The Silencing of a Laotian Son and established the Sombath Somphon Memorial Fund with INEB in 2024 to support education initiatives for disadvantaged communities in the Mekong region. Ladies and gentlemen, our fourth panelist, Dr. Shu Meng.
Good morning. Good morning to you all. And first, congratulations, Father Flaviano, to be 2025 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee. In reaction to what you just said, a number of words really affected me deeply. Your speech is great, but there are some things you said there which really affected me very, very deeply. One is the word was made flesh. That reminded us that we are human beings. And flesh can be weak. We feel pain, but we can also feel empathy, and we can heal. And your words resonate so much for me because in some ways you help me to overcome weakness and also a healing process. I think all of us here have experienced darkness, pain, and tragedies, but we also come back hopefully stronger, and you have helped me do that. So thank you, Father Flavi. The second word that really also affected me deeply is the word of compassion. Because in our work and in our life, if we do not approach it with compassion, it's meaningless. It can also be cruelty, as someone else mentioned. We need to, like what Father Flavia has done, all that he has done is actually driven by a sense of compassion, a sense of being at one with the people, the kids on the street, the people who were victims of the drug war, and with the widows and the left behind survivors. And it is that compassion which carries us forward. So once more, Father Flavia, thank you so much for, again, reminding me and hopefully everyone here how important it is to embrace compassion in practice in all our work. Lastly, the word that affected me most in your speech was dignity. Dignity is so important. If we look at what you have done, the kids you bring forth, just giving them a bath, encouraging them to take a bath so that they can become human again and to see themselves with a sense of dignity. They are no longer that dirty, starving little kid living in the street, but they are another human person with dignity. And so are the survivors of the drug war. We all must continue to respect that dignity in every one of us and in others. So, Father Flavia, I thank you. Lastly, I would also like to say what you have done and what other people like Ananda has done, and all the people who are here recognized by the Ramon Magsaysay Foundation. You have restored hope. You have shown the way that we can, whatever we do, in whatever little way, we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Shumeng. Thank you very much. I deeply admire the four of you, Father Flavi, our three panelists, from Dhaka. You are at the forefront of looking after the last, the lost, and the least. And you give a lot of hope to all the people out there who wish to do the same. We will be opening our panel shortly for questions from the audience here with us at the Ramon Magsaysay Hall and online on Zoom, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live. For our live audience in the Ramon Magsaysay Hall and in the plaza outside, I'd like to welcome our guests from outside watching on video. Welcome, everyone. This is the biggest audience so far. So I'd like, you may write your questions on the pieces of paper provided to you during the registration and to give to our ushers. For those who are joining online, you may type your question in the QA tab on Zoom and in the comment section on Facebook and on YouTube. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. However, I'd like to begin the question and answer by being the first one to ask the question to our panelists and to Father Flavi. As a member of a Catholic religious congregation, obviously Father Flavi is guided by what we call Catholic social teachings. These are documents that the Church have released throughout its history. But the Catholic social teachings finds its echo and is consistent with the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, or UDHR. UDHR writes that justice and human rights are inherently tied together and are interconnected. This is what Justice Carpio mentioned earlier, that justice and compassion come hand in hand. My question is, would you like to say something about this, how justice and compassion, justice and human rights are intertwined and cannot be separated? They say that there can be no human rights if there is no justice. Would you like to say something about this in the context of your own country and your own culture? Maybe we can begin with Attorney Colleen.
Thank you, Brother Dotto, for that question. I think in response to this question, I would like to give some reflections on the situation in the Philippines, and most especially on our experience in very tumultuous times in our history, especially right now, we're living it. We are seeking justice for mass atrocities during the time of former President Duterte. And I think when we arrive at moments of key moments of justice, like the arrest, like him being detained, or there being an ongoing investigation, we are reminded of who we are doing it for. We are reminded of communities who continue to claim what is due to them, to claim the truth about their loved ones. If we ask, this reminds me that whenever I ask families and survivors of what justice means to them, there's a range of answers. No? One answer is, yes, we want there to be imprisonment. Yes, we want X, Y, and Z to be jailed. We want them to pay. We want them to support our the needs of our children. We want them to send, we want their money and their assets to send our children to school and to put foods on our table. But also, they would also say that justice for us is truth. Justice means that for the longest time, the state has a narrative about who must be killed. People who must be killed, or people who were killed, were drug pushers, were drug addicts, were peddlers. They were good for nothing. They were scums of society. They're the cancer of society. So these are the labels that the state has put and has placed, has imposed upon those they kill. But families know their sons, know their husbands, their partners. Families who want justice, want the truth to come out, want the narrative of truth to come out about their sons, their husbands, their partners. This reminds me again of another community leader. He used to say that, he would say that, I want it to be that when my brother's story is told in history, I don't want it to be about how he was killed, but how he lived his life. And I think at the intersection of justice, truth, and rights, we go back to what Father Flavi shared earlier about dignity and the human person. We are reminded how the human person and the self and us collectively have dignity. And on the last point, I think that I would like to raise is that where we are now in terms of justice and accountability, it's not magic. It didn't happen overnight. And it didn't happen because of charity, of maintaining the imbalances of power in our society. Even I, as a lawyer, I admit I exercise a certain level of power. I can exercise a certain level of charity over communities. But at the end of the day, the answer is with communities that are empowered. Communities who can say that these are our rights, this is what we can claim, so we will claim them, and we will do something about this. And so I think, this is where our path is right now, I think, that we must continue the conversation towards justice and accountability and how we can hold each other together and how we can empower communities more to hold and to claim their rights towards that same goal of justice, accountability, and truth.
Thank you, Attorney. As Father mentioned earlier, there is no healing if there is no truth. Thank you. Ananda?
I think this works now. Yes, thanks. So I think if I go back to when I entered the field that I now work in as a young psychology graduate, I don't think that there was anything in my education that spoke about rights or justice, for that matter. And yet, very soon, engaging in work with survivors of conflict, of violence in Sri Lanka, but also other kinds of exclusions, it was very clear immediately that people's suffering was connected to things that were unjust, that were not fair, that were wrong morally, and that needed to be responded to by others, but also that was desired to be responded to from those who suffered from a lens of justice, of restoration, but also sometimes of holding to account. And I think the challenge that I experienced, and many of my colleagues who are and generations that continue to be trained in ways that don't acknowledge issues of the interconnectedness of issues of justice and equality with issues of well-being and mental health, is that we have to learn. We have to learn from communities, we have to learn from lawyers, we have to learn from those who struggle for other kinds of social justice. And I think we realize that, in a way, the bedrock, the foundation of recovery, the foundation of a more equitable society is based on those principles of justice. And finding ways to embody that, whether it's just in the way that you navigate or acknowledge what has happened to someone in a private therapeutic context, or whether it is standing with people in the context of their facing up to the state or some other actor, asking for redress, asking for the end to an ongoing violation. I think it becomes really important that we find both the intellectual, kind of connection between these things, but also, I think, very much the kind of underlying emotional and kind of experiential connection of these things. And I think that is the ongoing challenge for us in this time. And I think recognizing that it's not only sometimes violations at the individual level, but also things that are more systemic, that are sometimes harder to see, but that create the social conditions and inequalities that lead to suffering, that lead to victimization, that lead to exclusion. And it is a challenge for us because you're not trained to think that way. You're not educated to think that way. But that is where I think we can help each other in sharing frameworks and making those connections. Thank you.
Thank you. Shumeng?
Thank you. I live in Laos, and in the Lao political context and governance system, terms like rights and justice are actually very difficult for people to understand. And because the political context of Laos is a government is supreme. It's still under the communist government, although economically is nothing socialist about it anymore, but it is completely under a one-party state control. Under that kind of governance system, people are socialized within the education system, within the family, and overall society, that the government will provide you with what is right, and your rights are basically emanating only from what the government gives you. It's not about your ability to claim your rights. And justice is almost a joke. Because if you, like my husband, where do I seek justice? He was just snatched away, and his disappearance was actually recorded by the police CCTV. It was how he was taken was so clear that the police came and took him away. And this is the kind of situation that the people in Laos live. So how do I, someone put my name as a human rights activist? Frankly, in Laos, if I were to say I'm a human rights activist, the police would take me away. So I will have to tread and to do things in a careful way. So we can overcome it. We can do it, but in a smart way. But for me, working in the Lao context, working with young people, the first thing I try to get everybody to try to overcome is overcome your fear. It is fear that actually robs you of any sense about claiming your own rights or claiming justice when injustice is done to you, individually or community. Today, for example, in Laos, there are lots of people, especially in the rural areas, who have lost land. Their land has been taken by investors who get permission from the government to take their land and to either, in the name of development, plantation agriculture. So lots of people have lost the land and lost their livelihoods, and also access to the forest, which is part of the community where this is their food source, the source for fuel, and source for many things in their lives. So my role, I see, I'm only an individual, and I'm trying to work with other people to say, okay, how can we overcome that fear? By overcoming a fear, at least you try to understand that your basic human rights should not be trampled upon. And through education, to working with the young people, although my husband, Sombat's, used to have an organization working with young people, that has been dismantled. But many of the work that he did continue on in a different way. Many of the people, young people he taught today was working in the community, but in a more quiet and more careful way.
Thank you, Dr. Shumeng. Before we ask Father Flavi to answer the question, we'll go to Professor Syra on Zoom. Professor Syra, would you like to say anything on the question that we posed to the panel?
Yes, thank you very much. I think in Bangladesh, the recent best practice of where people have fought for their rights is the recent revolution that took place last year in July and August 2024, where a mass movement led by students, led by laborers, the workforce, and then later on joined by civil society, toppled an extremely repressive regime that had been ruling or dominating Bangladesh for over 15 years. During that time, the government also undertook a war against drugs in 2018 that was very similar to what happened in the Philippines. Enforced disappearances started occurring as a practice from around 2010. So after this regime collapsed on the 5th of August, there is a new interim government, and the International Crimes Tribunal that we have in place is now trying the perpetrators of all these acts of enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings, and people now have their voice back to demand justice because they did not get justice before. The situation of the courts, the situation of the government, the bureaucracy was very similar to what the previous speaker said, is happening in Laos right now. There was no independence of judiciary at all, and all the judges were politically appointed. There was no justice for people. So Bangladeshi people have regained their voices. They are now demanding their rights. They're demanding reparations for their wrongs that have been done to them. And this interim government that has been in, well, basically that's looking after the government right now, they established an inquiry commission to investigate all these acts of enforced disappearances that occurred for the last 15 years and more. And right now they have got 1,900 cases, and all these have been given to the International Crimes Tribunal, and hopefully there will be justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. We'll ask Father Flavi to answer the question.
Yeah, thank you. The question is also about, it's about the inherent and the parallelism between CTS, Church Social Teaching, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, let me begin with a short anecdote, a story actually, from a congressman 2 months ago. He called me and asked me, Father, we read in church what you call oratio imperata for justice, peace, against corruption, something like that. And it's well worded, it's a beautiful prayer, but my question is, how come you are reading and we are praying such a prayer now, but when the heads were being blown off, when bodies were being killed, a minimum of 12 to 32 a day, how come no such prayer ever existed? How come no prayer like this ever came about? That was his question. And of course, my reply is, mamalay ko sa'yo. But sir, I was joking. I don't know. I'm not the church. I'm not the cardinal. I'm not the bishop. I'm just a priest. I'm just a low-lying priest who does what sometimes my superior doesn't want me to do. I have one superior here in the presence of Father Randy and the Sacred Heart team. Thank you for the support. Thank you so much. I hardly had that during the time of Duterte. They were the ones who bravely came. But my point is simply, though they are inherent, it cannot be denied that there is also a huge dichotomy between reality and prayer, between what is enshrined in the Constitution and how it is being enforced on a day-to-day basis. We have the homeless people here. We have the victims here. How difficult is it to get a simple piece of ID when the homeless comes to the NBI? But if it's a businessman or a congressman, he need not even fall in line. So the dichotomy is first and foremost needs to be addressed. Now, do not ask me how to address that, because I believe the words of our fellow panelists suffices. Daily acts of compassion, daily acts of kindness, surprising, beautiful things offered to the neighbor is already human rights. And perhaps to end, you want it more practical? I'll give you one. And sorry, I'll say this in Tagalog. Kung ano ang debosyon mo, ipakita mo sa eleksyon. Hindi dapat magkahiwalay ang debosyon at eleksyon. These are also words of Paring Bert Alejo. Hindi dapat magkahiwalay. How do you put that in English? What you pray is something that should be translated clearly, vividly during election days. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Flavi. As they say, faith without action is no faith at
No
all.
faith at all.
We'd like to call our friend Robbie, who will help us with the question and answer from the floor and online.
Okay, this isn't working, so I'll just take the, but before anything else, if you don't mind, I do want to squeeze in a question. But I do want to say also, Father, there was a question here from the audience about the silence of the church, and I think you already alluded to that. I'll take that as my excuse to be able to turn in my second question. I was struck by what you showed, yung dambana, no? The monument, your own initiative to create a monument. And I also acknowledge what Attorney Colleen said, the importance of the truth being the narrative of the state. I wanted to ask anybody here, how important, but also how impossible is it for the truth and our search for justice and acknowledgement that it actually be the narrative of the state? You know where I'm coming from. We have friends here from the Commission on Human Rights. We have a law. We have a budget. We have land already for a monument to human rights victims of martial law. And despite the law, despite the budget, despite the land, we cannot even start to build that monument. And we are beholden still to the political will and the initiatives of politicians, much less the state. And yet you have these initiatives to have a small monument. And we say that we can make truth and the search for justice a collective search and dedication by society. But those are two things, society and state. How important and how impossible is it? And I'd like to ask also your perspective from other countries that may have been speaking about truth commissions, for example.
Okay. Anyone would like? This is not according to age. Let me begin perhaps my 2 cents. For me, during times such as what happened to us in the bloodiest time of 2016 to 2022, truth had to be defiant. If we wanted the truth, it had to stand and it had to disturb. Why? Because that was the tactic of the enemy. They defied everything and anything that was valuable to us. They defied life. They desecrated the faith. Everything that was nice and pure, they destroyed. That was their side of the truth. Now, in my case, I'm struggling, and I will struggle forever to bring back what was nice, what was clean, what was decent. And to do that, I felt and I went through like hell in defending that truth. So I believe that it takes both a huge act of courage, a political will, but more importantly, I turn to the victims who are most in need of it as my inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Flavi. Attorney
Hello.
Celine?
Hello. Thank you, Robbie, for that question. I think I'll answer it baliktad. I'll answer first why it's impossible. Okay. It's impossible. I'll point out a few things that's obvious to the Philippine context. No? Number one, disinformation and social media. No? So, when not just during the arrest, no, when it was handed down, it resurfaced, no, during the arrest of Duterte. But even before, there are narratives already being parroted, even by unknown bots, you know, which are machineries of lies online or on social media, right? Whether this is on, for example, misleading, with the purpose of misleading the public on what the purpose or intent of the campaign on the war on drugs was. No? And this has been carried out, this has been echoed throughout the years. No? It was out of safety, for thinking of the safety of communities. We are weeding out those who don't deserve to live. Duterte is a father, is a caring father. You know, so one, disinformation on social media. Second, it's impossible because of certain policies in place by the state that prevents us, civil society, journalists, advocates, communities, from accessing information. For example, we have a Freedom of Information executive order, supposedly. And we have a platform where we can ask anything that's supposedly public, no, from the government, so that we can conduct our research, we can build our cases. But truth be told, there are a lot of times where we cannot actually use this or access this, and our requests are being denied. No? So policy, no? It's impossible because of policy. Third, there are, even with actually, for example, legal rulings, sometime 2018 and 2019, the Supreme Court handed out a resolution in a landmark case that supposedly orders the state, the police, to produce documents on the drug war from 2016 to 2017. This was an order from the Supreme Court, the highest court of the land. But if you look at reports and reports on and findings on these documents and on the supposedly nuggets of truth of the narrative, they just expose poor police work or poor police documentation, for example. So even with clear legal rulings, it's impossible to get at the truth because of the use of power to resist giving the truth. So now I turn to the second point, which is why it's important, especially in our context. It's important because we cannot afford another regime that conceals the truth. And this becomes part, the truth, the narratives, they are the building blocks of our history. So, say, today, we hide the truth about the drug war killings. We dismiss and dilute the effects on families. Who's to say that, in 10, 20, 30 years from now, we elect another killer, another murderer? This is already familiar to us. This is what we want to prevent. No? Kasi even with, for example, the Human Rights Claims Board during for the martial law regime, we are faced with this administration. No? So I think I end with that. It's important for us to address and preserve the truths from society because of non-recurrence. No? Yeah. So, thank you, Robin.
I'd just like to add on what Attorney Colleen was saying. Even if we had data and even if we know what our truth is, the powers that be will always say, this is our truth. That's not the truth. Even if, for example, Shumeng was saying, it's the government who gives us the rights. We don't have rights. So if the government says that's the truth, and they control everything, then that's the way it will be. So it's in that sense, it's very hard, and we have to work doubly hard. I'd like to ask our panelists if they have anything to...
Yes, I mean, in the context of Laos, it's even more difficult. But I have to be an optimist. The truth is interpreted by the powers that be. Justice, access to justice is difficult because the courts are not, free. The judges are appointed, and the cases are depending on what the panel of judges interpreted to be. So in that context, very difficult. But I think, let's not give up hope. Social media. We all look at social media with, it's ambiguous. Young people are all engaged with social media, most of the time to scroll, most of the time to take pictures of themselves and post it on social media. But it is a source of information. I can say that in Laos, where the newspapers is a joke, it's completely controlled. So the Lao people don't read the newspapers. I wouldn't want to read the newspaper also, but they have a way of finding about other information, about what other people are saying about Laos, about critics and so on, from the social media. And some people are. Young people are accessing. The government tries to control social media. They have a law, they even have a decree that if you use social media to defame the state, you actually can be face long imprisonment. And there's a case of a young woman who actually used social media to talk about the flood victims in her community, which did not get the compensation approved by the government. We don't know where the compensation left, it's probably through corruption. So she used social media to talk about how the families in her community, the flood victims, have not been compensated. She was arrested. And she had to spend 14 years in jail. Okay? Another young man who, through his Facebook, was talking about, how young people are facing issues. A gunman came into his little cafe and shot him point blank, and he nearly died. Luckily, the UN was able to, evacuate him, and he's now living in Thailand, and recently went to France. So, but despite this, there are still, and I'm following it, young people are using social media to access information. You cannot keep the lid down. Truth will be truth. Lies will be lies. And I believe that, we have governments who behave like Attila the Hun. But they too will pass.
I think in societies like ours that have deep divisions, and governments that are complicit at different times in the commission of acts of atrocity and violence, I think truth is always, a battleground. It's a place where there's competition for the accounts of history, and I would just like to give a small example of the way in which one cannot be complacent about the way in which we acknowledge the past. So Sri Lanka had a 30-year civil war along larger ethnic lines. We also had two class-based insurrections and counter-insurgencies from the state, which left many tens of thousands dead or missing. And following the second one of those in the late 1980s and early 1990s, there was conservative estimates of around 50 to 60,000 people who were killed or disappeared during that short period. And the government that came into power in the mid-1990s sought to acknowledge that and actually commissioned a memorial on the road to the parliament so that lawmakers would be reminded of what had happened and would never let it happen again. And it was called the Shrine of the Innocent, and a prominent artist was commissioned to make this. In the early 2010s, that shrine was actually erased. It was removed without any sense of irony to make way for some beautification. But the underlying meaning was not lost. It was also by a regime that was implicated in large-scale disappearances and killings. And essentially, it's a good reminder that, we can't count on monuments, that we will have changes of government. We will have good ones and bad ones and worse ones and better ones. And in a sense, memory has to exist at multiple levels. It has to exist at the level of the state, and state narratives, history books, syllabi, public discourse, but it also has to exist at the level of communities, because in the communities close to where I lived for nearly 2 decades, there are conflicts between communities where people on neighboring villages are implicated in the violence towards each other, and where the stories, the histories, the truths are also secret, are not known well. They're known to a few people. They're not written down anywhere. They don't make it into the commission reports, or sometimes they do. And there's a need to recover those, to transmit those, to share those when people are able to, before they pass on, before they forget, for the next generation to know what happened to their grandparents or their parents, right? And so I think that this work of seeking truth or understanding the many truths that exist is something that has to be done at every level, but it's also something that is very personal, that each of us, having lived through these histories, we know certain things about what happened, and we have to share that with our children, with our friends, with our students, and with our co-workers, and that is, I think, the work that we all share.
Yeah. Truth, memory, history, we cannot rely on monuments. Thank you for that. I'd like to combine 3 questions here into one. This is for you, Father Flavi, and obviously these come from young people in our audience. But basically the question, if I may collapse it into something really simple yet powerful: compassion and justice. How do we live it?
How do we live compassion and justice? I again would like to go back to simple ways. Let's not make it too grand and too complicated. A simple hello, a basin, a meal shared to someone, stopping or standing against someone trying to bully another person, telling the truth, making a post in Facebook saying that justice and hope are real. There are so many beautiful, simple things that you could do and engage with. And being in social media, being truthful in social media and media can be a beautiful thing. Thank you.
Okay, and a follow-up question from David, also a student. The compassion and our valuing of forgiveness, especially in a country such as ours, do we extend that even to those who caused us great harm?
It's difficult. David, right? David, good luck. Especially if you're talking about your love life, good luck. But one thing I know and one thing I've learned, forgiving does not mean forgetting. Forgiving is taking and listening to yourself, what your needs are, what your priorities are, without trying to add burden to the other person. Forgiving is actually for you. Forgiving means that you refuse to be dictated or enslaved by the other person. If you're able to forgive, then you're the better person. You're the better man. But wag mo namang parusahan pa yung babae. But simply put it as that forgiving does not mean that you forget. You forgive because you want to free yourself from that bondage. Thank you.
If we have time for one more question, but I'd like to direct this to our friends from abroad. President Duterte said, you talk about human rights, I'm talking about human life. It's a very powerful statement. And I think you also know from your societies that there have been all of this talk that human rights itself is a Western imposition on us, that it represents values that are not necessarily for our region or for their respective societies. What do you say to people when they ask you or tell you or challenge that very question of whether or not human rights has a universal definition and whether or not human rights is in fact a universal value?
So, I'm not someone who's well schooled in human rights. It's in the environment which I work, and very often when I work with communities, they don't use frameworks of human rights, but they have a sense of what is natural justice, what is compassion, and these come from the different both religious and secular traditions that people draw from, and you will find that they are very consistent with the universal frameworks of human rights. The language is different, but the underlying concepts are about fairness, around respect, around protecting the vulnerable and the weak. And I think that, I think it's a bit of a red herring to frame it only in terms of a critique of a framework. If we can shift the register of the conversation to a different framework and find one that resonates with people, and I think that is something that then is much harder for people to engage with. So I think we shouldn't be slavish in terms of the frameworks. We have to understand that people are engaging, but there is a sense of natural justice that many people, and also have to examine, because sometimes we have internalized certain ideas. Right now we have a debate about whether corporal punishment and violence against children is acceptable in Sri Lanka. And there are people who are defending it on the basis that this is somehow traditional. Well, that's not the question. The question is violence something that we should endorse against anyone, especially young and vulnerable people? And what does it mean? And the answer to that can be found in any of the major religions of Sri Lanka, as well as more humanist frameworks.
I agree with Ananda. I mean, all these terms about the human rights conventions, the frameworks, and so on, in the context of most of the people who live in Laos, who live in the communities, it doesn't resonate with them, and they don't understand what it means. So in that context, it's really, but that doesn't mean that rights don't exist, justice don't exist, and as Ananda has said, it's within the local context and within how people actually understand and practice it. One thing I find that, it's an important thing and we may have to consider is how do we introduce this into the curriculum, into the education, because at the end of the day, it's an education process that really get people to move on and to accept some of these concepts which are maybe abstract to them. But I also acknowledge that working through education system may not be so easy because governments control the curriculum. And they make sure that they control the curriculum because they know by controlling the curriculum, controlling the education process, it would really control the minds of the citizen. But I still try. I mean, in our work, in our local work, in the work with the communities, in the work with young people, that is where you try and start the change process. Thank you.
Would you like to say?
Well, I would like to understand what was going on the mind of the former president when he said that. Your concern is human rights, mine is human life. I don't know how many fentanyl he was given that very evening. But I find it so contradicting because for anyone to understand or just to see and read the statements, these are two inseparable realities. You cannot talk about life without touching, without following, without feeling that life comes with rights, just as rights are part of life. So I will not waste any much of that, but simply say that I want to understand where he is coming from because we know what happened afterwards or even before that. Lives were lost, corruption prevailed, and even the way he treated women. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay.
We're good? Okay, all right.
Yeah, before anything else, and thank you once again to our panelists and to Brother Dodo especially for leading us into that conversation. We'd of course like to acknowledge everybody's presence here, especially students from St. Jude Catholic School, Centro Escolar University, De La Salle University, Ateneo de Manila, University of Santo Tomas, and Gapan City College. Nagagalak din po tayo na kasama natin, na mga kasama natin sa Kalinga at Paghilom. We'd like to acknowledge human rights advocates and defenders with us today in the Sacred Heart Parish in Kamuning, of course, headed by Father Randy Flores, SVD. And Dodo, would you like to offer, just a brief synthesis of everything
Right. Robbie, before I do the synthesis, I'd like to acknowledge Teatro Paghilom. I think they're all here. Can you please all stand? Those are members of Teatro Paghilom. Welcome po, welcome. One of the good things that Father Flavi has done is part of the healing process is he brings all the victims, the orphans, the widows into a theater. How good is that? So welcome po and thank you. As a form of synthesis, I have 3 very short points. First, the story of Father Flavi is the story of a God who gives second chances. The love he has felt from God, and it's not a theological kind of love. It is a love that he has felt. It is a love that is real to him. This is the same love that he brings into his work, in his ministry with the poor and with the victims of the EJK. Second, the word compassion has been popping up the whole morning. And I think compassion is what all our panelists and Father bring into their work. It gives them heart. It drives them to pursue justice. But not just compassion, it's really radical compassion. It's what gives them the courage against all odds, against so much challenges, to help the poor, and to help victims of violence. And third, because I have been here in the last 3 lectures, I will try to tie the 3 lectures together. The call and invitation of our Ramon Magsaysay laureates, of Father Flavi, of Shaina, of Safina, and Educate Girls is this. It is the responsibility of each and every one of us in this room and each and every one of us in the world to make the world a better place. One, to ensure that all children, girls, and boys get an education, to be empowered, to empower those that have traditionally been in the fringes, who have not been given opportunities to be the best persons they can be. You don't have to be a philanthropist to help children go to school. You can encourage, you can ask others who have the wherewithal to help those who don't have the opportunity for schooling. Second, it is our responsibility to be stewards of our own Mother Earth in our own backyards, whether this is the beach or in the mountains, to understand how Mother Earth is being polluted in ways small and big, and to be examples to those around us through small acts. Third, it is the responsibility of each one of us to call out injustices and corrupt practices, to restore dignity to those whose dignity has been lost, to show compassion, or radical compassion, to those who have never felt any care and love in their life, to show acts of kindness, to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked. As Justice Carpio said, second chances is not a privilege, it is a right in a just society. May we all have the courage and the bravery of Father Flavi and our panelists. May we never get tired to speak of what is just and what is right. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you to Father Flavi. Thank you.
And we would ask the panelists to please stay on the stage for the final portion of our program. Thank you once again, Brother Dodo, for guiding us through your synthesis and our discussions today. Before we move on to the last part, we would like to thank the Philippine Airlines, official airline partner of the 2025 Ramon Magsaysay Lecture Series, and SGV, major sponsor of the 2025 Ramon Magsaysay Awards Lecture Series. Today's lecture is presented by the Peace and Equity Foundation. The 2025 RMTLI Lecture Series is also supported by Pioneer Insurance. We'd also like to acknowledge our co-conveners, and we'd like to thank the official media partners of the 67th Ramon Magsaysay Awards Festival season. Again, just to remind everyone, this afternoon, 1 to 2 p.m., the Teatro ng Kalinga at Paghilom will be presenting a special creative theatrical performance right here at the Ramon Magsaysay Hall. Lunch will be provided for our attendees today. Please secure your food stub to be presented to the food distribution tables at the Ramon Magsaysay Plaza to collect your packed meals. We'd also like to invite everyone to the 67th Ramon Magsaysay Awards presentation ceremonies on November 7, Friday, 4 p.m. at the Metropolitan Theater. This will be live streamed as well on social media platforms. And now, to officially close our program, we would like to call on stage Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation trustee, Ms. Emily Abrera.
Good morning, everyone. How good to see you again, Father Flavi.
Lovely seeing you.
He's my good friend for many years. What a rich discussion. Parang malayo pa ang tanghalian, marami na tayong maaring namnamin. No? We have a lot to chew on, even before lunch. Sitting through this morning's lecture, I am sure that many of you, like me, were reminded of something we've seen or read about many times in life. How people who have lost almost everything still find ways to care for others, It's humbling. It tells us that compassion doesn't spring from abundance. It grows from this recognition that we are all connected and that we all belong to one another. That truth came alive in 2025 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee, Father Villanueva's lecture on radical compassion, restoring dignity through second chances. His story tells us that faith does not reside in prayer alone, that when lived with courage, it moves hearts and minds, it builds human-centered solutions, it restores humanity's faith. Through the work of the Arnold Janssen Kalinga Foundation program, Kalinga and program Paghilom, compassion is transformed from sentiment to system, creating spaces where the excluded are seen, the condemned are embraced, and the forgotten are once again called by their names. The sheer physicality of healing, of uncovering truths, is a basin, can be seen in a basin, a washcloth, a bar of soap, clean clothes, to reveal the person within. And that is why I think of all the sessions, maybe this was probably the most spiritual, one can say. It leaves us much to think about. Our panelists deepen this discussion, this reflection, showing that empathy must be embedded in the systems that we design if we are to achieve the justice we seek and give our communities the nurturance that they need. I wanted to add just a few thoughts because I couldn't help but take them down. It was such a rich discussion. Thank you, Father Flavi. You have not lost your humor despite all that has happened in the last few years. But laced with humor, as his talk was, he did not evade discussing truth. And the very important thought that healing is incomplete without truth. And yet, it is so elusive, as in the case of Dr. Shui Ming. And I remember visiting Sambat the year before he disappeared. And that the story is incomplete and the healing is elusive when we cannot get hold of the facts. Mind-boggling as Father Flavi's work is, and that was, I think, mentioned by one of our panelists, the tasks involved are plentiful. And it's a pity that Dr. Raquel is not here because I know she is a staunch partner. And in all these tasks, I think Father Flavi relates most to the image of the shepherd, like a pastol. The faith and the courage to leave the flock, the many, to search for the one lost lamb, because the flock is not complete without the last one in. And that's an important thought to keep in mind. We also, I think, cannot miss what is present in the midst of Father Flavi's stories. And this is the importance of humility and compassion, integrity as qualities of leadership. Perhaps today, most importantly, in the country's leadership. I call this a spiritual session. Father Flavi's work really underscores the long view of life and death. to save those who survive, it is necessary to bury their dead. But the dead cannot be buried until you uncover the truth. And so that is how it connects. With these thoughts, we bring to a close the 2025 Ramon Magsaysay Transformative Leadership Institute Lecture Series. Over the past days, we have heard from the Foundation to Educate Girls Globally. Wonderful lecture from Shaina Ali and her waterlogged country. And now from Father Flavio Villanueva. Different contexts, different challenges, and yet we recognize that the same heartbeat guides their work. Yes, they all believe that change begins with caring, deep caring, from whence springs radical compassion. This, I think, is what these RMTLI lectures have offered us, a clearer view of what it means to serve, not by standing above others, but by standing with them. And this is what the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation continues to stand for, the enduring greatness of spirit that lives in these transformative leaders who lift others, not for recognition, but because it is the right thing to do. So before we end, let us offer another warm round of applause to Father Flavio Villanueva, to our panelists, and to all our 2025 Ramon Magsaysay awardees, whose lives remind us truly greatness of spirit is not that rare, as touched on by Brother Dodo here. It is simply the best of what we each can be. I shall close with a final question. Anyone here still feeling lost? If at any time you should feel lost, after today, I assure you, you will be found. Thank you, and may the rest of your morning be as inspired as mine is.
Thank you very much, Ms. Emily Abrera. And we'd like to ask Ms. Abrera to stay on stage, join Brother Dodo and our panelists and Father Flavio on stage for to take a memento of this moment. If we could ask you to come up on front. We would also like to call on stage the directors of the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation, Ms. Chiclet Toledo, Mr. Victor Platon, Noemi Samson, and the director of the Ramon Magsaysay Transformative Leader Institute, Joy Flavier Alampay. And could we ask the audience to stand up? Our panelists would love to have a. If the panelists could go downstage, we'll take a selfie with everybody in the audience, please. Our photographers will direct everybody. If our panelists and speakers could please go down on stage in front of the audience. Wag na masyado. Go ahead, but we're wasting a lot of time. Okay, kung pwede. Okay, everybody? Okay. Okay, magsaysay at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, maraming salamat po. Thank you once again for joining us at the RMTLI lecture series this morning with Father Villanueva, 2025 Ramon Magsaysay Awardee. Please let us know what you think about this lecture by filling in the feedback form when you scan the QR code on the screen. Please take note of the QR code on screen. We would love to hear what you thought, what you think, what you take away from this lecture series. We will provide certificates of completion for those who answer the feedback form. We would love to see you share your time. Please tag us on social media at Magsaysay Award with the hashtags Ramon Magsaysay Award and hashtag Ramon RMTLI Lecture Series. To keep updated on RMAF's latest activities, please visit the website at rmaward.asia or follow us on social media at Magsaysay Award. Now, everybody, please proceed to the food distribution tables located at the RM Plaza in an orderly fashion. Maraming salamat po.